The next questions I would do are numbers 21 and 22. 20 is a broad general question. I want to leave that one to the end. And 27 and 28 have to do with the graph, and I also prefer leaving those to the end. Whereas 21 and 22, I know my answer is going to be between lines 1 and 46. So that gives me a little bit of a condensed range to find the answer to this question. And I might even already know the answer, given that we've already read through this passage to do the other questions. But even still, at the very worst case scenario, I can just read from 1 to 46 and find the answer. The point I want to make in this episode is to stress the importance and the trickiness of the main idea questions, but in particular the word main, or sometimes you'll see primary. So they'll say, what is the main idea of the passage? What is the primary purpose of a paragraph or primary purpose of the passage? In this case, the question's asking, it is reasonable to conclude that the main goal of the scientist conducting the research described in the passage is to what? So what warning do I want to give you on these questions? Be very careful when they're asking you for the main idea or the primary purpose, or in this case, main goal. Be very careful that you are giving them the main idea, not just an idea that's in the passage, even in some tangential sense. You have to have a choice that encompasses the passage as a whole, or whatever selection of text you're looking at as a whole. What they will try to do in trap choices is pick out little tiny pieces of the passage and try to make you think that that's the main idea, or in this case, the main goal. And while, sure, it might be in the passage, it may not actually be the main idea. You need something as general as you can get that captures the majority of the passage, as much of the passage summarized by that choice. So let's take a look at this one. As we would read this, we would find some information that might lead us to the answer, but let's instead just go to the choices and see what we can evaluate based on them. So A, the main goal of the scientist is to learn how the hibernation patterns of bears and squirrels differ. So be careful here. We are talking about hibernation. That's the topic of the passage. The bulk of the passage is about bears, and we do read things about squirrels in lines 10 to 23 or so. So, okay, we've got stuff about bears and squirrels and hibernation, but let's get to the specifics. Do we learn how the patterns of the bears and squirrels differ? Is that really the main goal? Well, number one, we don't really learn anything about how they differ, so it's not even clear that that's even in the passage. But even still, let's say they do say something like, let's say they had a fact that said squirrels hibernate for 4 months and bears hibernate for 5 months, or something like that. Let's say there was that one throwaway sentence. That's not enough to be the answer, because that's only a small piece of it. If you remember, the whole point of this passage that we've read is to see why bears don't get sick, even though they're packed with cholesterol, packed with sugars, packed with fats, in order to survive through the winter. How come they don't get sick, right? That's the major issue here. Nothing really to do with comparing hibernation of bears and squirrels, so we can get rid of choice A. Determine the role that fat plays in hibernation. Again, we do talk about fat, we do talk about hibernation, it's part of this. But again, number one, do we discuss the role of fat? I guess in some sense, you can see in lines 10, right? Fat is where it's at for a hibernator. You bring your own lunch with you, like packing lunch is necessary, right? So we do get this idea that fat is important because it's the energy stores these animals need for the winter. But again, is that the main goal of the passage? They do talk about it a little bit, but it's only a small piece. It's not the overall thrust of the passage as a whole. So again, I would get rid of B. C, illustrate the important health benefits of exercise for humans. Now this one, I don't even think they mention anything about exercise, much less exercise for humans. We're talking about animal hibernation. So C is just completely off. D, explore possible ways to prevent human diseases. Now this seems almost ridiculous because, again, most of the passage is about bears hibernating and why bears don't get sick. But think about it. Why are they studying the fact or the idea that bears don't get sick? Well, notice, in fact, we can find some specific evidence for D beyond the logical reasoning for it. So look in the first paragraph. Understanding how hibernators, including ground squirrels, marmots, and bears, survive their long winter's naps may one day offer solutions for problems such as heart disease, osteoporosis, and muscular dystrophy. So right at the beginning of the passage, the passage is framed to say, okay, we're studying these hibernators because we want to know why they survive these kind of tough metabolic conditions where they're eating all this fat and eating all this food and getting high cholesterol. But we want to know, maybe if we understand that, we might be able to solve human problems, heart disease, osteoporosis, and muscular dystrophy. And in fact, even though that was one citation, we can see later in the passage, in fact, lines 75 and 76. I know it's outside the bounds here, but if you look at 75 to 76, and let me actually just bring that over here. So Frobert hopes to find some protective molecule that could stave off hardened arteries in humans as well. So the whole point of the passage is, again, why do these animals not get sick when they pump up their bodies with fat and cholesterol? That's the core reason, and so their goal, presumably, would be to use that knowledge to help human beings. So the reason why D is going to be our answer is it frames why they're doing this, why they're doing all of the studies on bears and their hibernation, and they're eating fat and eating these blueberries and measuring their cholesterol. All of this is to serve their main goal, which is to find out why they don't get sick, and ultimately to prevent human diseases. Going to 22, we already found the citation. It was in choice A, lines 1 to 5. Let's just check the rest. 10 to 13, we've already talked about this. This was the discussion of fat being important for hibernators. The trick with this is if you put B as your answer for the number 21, you're probably going to put B for your answer to 22 because they are linked together. So be very careful about that. 31 to 35. To see how fattening up affects Scandinavian brown bears, Frobert and his colleagues ventured into the wilds of Sweden following signals given off by radio transmitters or GPS devices on tagged bears. Doesn't really give any main goal here. It doesn't really link up with any of these choices, so it doesn't make sense. 42 to 46. Once a bear is under the tranquilizer's influence, the scientists have 60 minutes max to get the animal from its den, weigh and measure it, draw blood samples, and do minor surgeries to collect fat and other tissues. Again, it gives some description of what they did in the experiment, how they're collecting their data, but it doesn't give the main goal, right? Why the scientists are doing what they're doing. So this one's going to be choice A. To learn more about Reason Prep's SAT, SAT subject test, and ACT video courses, go to reasonprep.com/enroll, and you can find the link in the description below the video.